Yo, what's going on, snipers, and welcome back to our Atlanta Thrashers franchise mode here in NHL 21. So in last episode, we simmed more of the season, and our team has a very solid record at 35, 23, and 3 here at the trade deadline, and we've been getting some really good offensive numbers from our top players, and even also guys that are on like the third line and whatnot. The only problem really with this team is defensive play at the moment. We are one of the worst defensive teams in the NHL, if I'm not mistaken, and we need to kind of maybe address that at the trade deadline to kind of help us for the playoffs, because I don't know if we're going to be outscoring our problems in the postseason or not. But as you can see at the moment, we are one of the best offensive teams just behind the San Jose Sharks. And then in goals against, though, we are all the way down here at 2.98, I think it said. Yeah, 2.98. So we're kind of around mid-table, but I would like to improve this a little bit going into the postseason. And then also our special teams haven't been great, so we could always address our special teams, but that's not much of a cause for concern as our defensive play, I would say. But we've actually been okay on the penalty kill as well at 82.4%, so we're going to address those at the deadline. We do have a few comments to go over before we actually get into that deadline. And the first comment is from WMRA. He says, Hal Gill would make a fine acquisition, but I think you need to acquire some more 82 to 84 overall defensemen to help neutralize that goals against statistic, which I agree with, but at the same time, I would really like to be playing our young guys to an extent, because they have actually been playing pretty good. Like Martinez is a plus 27, Walls a plus 23. And then you get into Blugis and Brody, it's a little bit risky because Blugis is a plus 2 only, and Brody's a minus 8 for some reason. And then you get into our top 6 pairing, which has been really good for us as well. Reed Connolly's a plus 19, and Thomas Malik's a plus 20. But it could be just because the offense has been better when those two pairings have been out, and then I guess they're not as good when Blugis and Brody are out. But I think we're going to address our defense a little bit when at this deadline. We probably will bring in Hal Gill like you're suggesting, because I think I'm going to get rid of Ulf Pettersson. It's not just because he's been playing as a depth option. It's because we might as well trade him since we do have more defensive prospects. And then we could get Hal Gill into this defensive, we'll probably use him as a depth defender at first, but we might play him in the playoffs over some of our young guys to kind of protect them for like the first game or something like that type of thing. And then we do have a comment from Kagorodov. He says, getting some defense is the obvious move, but there is some interesting forwards like Antropov, Allison, and McCauley. I'd get at least one good forward, but it's your call, really. I agree with that we should probably get another good forward, but the only problem is we're going to have to take a young guy out of the lineup if we did so. And those 3 guys that you mentioned, I believe all have pretty bad contracts and very high value, so I don't think I'd be able to get them without giving up like a first round pick. So if I go to like the find trade option, for example, like these teams won't even actually send me back counter offers, but Nick Antropov, for example, he's got this much value, so he would probably take like at least a first round pick. And then also his contract is at 6 years at 9.87, which is a very steep contract if I do say so myself, and I don't really know if I want to pay a guy like that for that much term. He would be more of a rental option if I could, but I don't think I'm going to trade for him. And then we go to Washington, where Jason Allison and Alan McCauley are. Both these guys also have pretty big value, and they both are signed for 4 to 3 years, so I don't really like their contracts either. So we aren't going to be trading for one of those 3, and I don't think we're going to be trading much for a forward. Like, there is one forward I have in mind, but it's more just for a depth pickup, because we don't really have that depth forward other than Marcel Hossa when he goes back out of the lineup. So we will trade for one forward, but he won't be as big of an impact. He could end up being an impact in the playoffs, who knows, but I'll get to that in a bit. And our final comment is from HucksFan88. He says, I wouldn't make any trades just because this team is still young and you do not want to be taking away ice time from your younger players, which I agree with to an extent as well. I would really like to play the youth on this team, but at the same time, we do need maybe a couple veterans, because usually in the playoffs, teams are built around very veteran-heavy teams, but they do have their good young players as well. I'm not going to be taking any of these guys out of the lineup down a stretch of the regular season, but in the playoffs, I might have to substitute some of them out for these guys that we're picking up. So Anyways, that is the comments to go over. Let's get into this trade deadline and pick up those pieces. Actually, we'll make the trades before the deadline, and then we'll go into the deadline and just see if there's anything else we want to bring in, just to make it a little bit safer. So the first trade is for Hal Gill, which we're going to go to Tampa Bay. And I think actually we should go to the trade finder. If we go to the trade finder, I think they wanted like 2 4th-round picks for Hal Gill, which I think I'm okay with doing. And the good thing about Hal Gill is he actually matches our system pretty well. He matches like all defensive pairings, all penalty kill lines. He's a good depth defensive option. He actually could probably play in our top 4 if we wanted to, but we probably won't. The only problem is he is signed for like 2 more seasons after this, but I don't think that's that big of a risk because we could probably trade him away at some point if we want to. So we are going to go find trade option and see they want a 3rd and a 4th, which is not too bad. I think I'm willing to do so just because I don't want to give obviously our 1st round pick. I don't want to give a 2nd round pick, but a 3rd round pick could end up being just like a low top 6 forward at best, or at worst, maybe a medium top 9, and then a 4th round pick is probably going to be nothing. So we are going to make this trade. So a 3rd and a 4th to Tampa for Hal Gill. That will give us another depth defensive option. And now if we go to our edit lines thing, we do have Hal Gill with Pedersen and Bork as depth at this moment because Bork is still injured. But we are going to be trading away Pedersen as part of this next trade, and that way we will have another depth forward alongside Marcel Hossa as well. And the depth option we're going to be bringing in is actually a long-time center in the NHL at that point. He is actually in Detroit now, which is kind of weird. But we are going to be bringing in Stefan Yell. Stefan Yell is a pretty solid defensive forward. He's a 79 overall. He's only getting paid for 1 year. And I don't think he's played much this year. Actually, he has played a decent amount. He's not that bad of a defensive forward. And then if we go to here, he actually matches our 3rd line and our penalty kills, so he could help us out in the postseason if we need to. So we are going to trade for him, and as I was saying, we are going to be trading Pedersen because it's either trade him or we would have to put him on waivers after this. And if I put him on waivers, I feel like he could get claimed. And it doesn't really matter if we trade him away to an extent because we do have Guggenot, who's still in the QMJHL. We have Isaiah Edmonds. Like, we have an abundance of defensive prospects, so it's not that bad of a deal to get rid of Pedersen now. And I don't know if this would go through on its own. We could try it, and then maybe we could add in like a late round pick to make this go through. But let's see if this goes through on its own, and that is rejected. So we will probably add in a late round pick to this deal. Actually, wait, what do they want? Do they want late round picks? Yes, they do. Okay. That makes it a little bit easier. We have a lot of draft picks this year, actually. I didn't even remember we had this much picks. So it's good that we are trading away some of them, I guess. We do still have like 2 3rd-round picks, 3 4th-round picks, 2 5ths, a 6th, and 2 7ths. I think I could throw in a 5th-round pick of our own and see if this goes through. So Pedersen in a 5th, that actually looks like too much. Let me see if I could do the 7th-round pick. If I could get away with a 7th rounder, that would be nice. So Pedersen is 7th for Stefan Yell, and that's still rejected, so we could try going up to a 6th round pick. I wish there was some sort of system though with this game though, where like the AI would like counter offer you with a trade that makes sense for them, because it's just kind of annoying having to try and do this multiple times. Let's do that 5th round pick. Will that work? And that's still rejected. Okay, I could give up one of our 4th rounders. That's no problem. We have a lot of 4th rounders. Let's see if that goes through, and that one is accepted. So we bring in Stefan Yell. Yes, we do get rid of Pedersen, who's a good young defenseman that we signed in free agency, but this does give us a little bit more depth in terms of our forward core, so that is pretty nice. I'm actually going to just do a quick test and see what Hal Gill looks like in this spot over Brody. I'm not going to be playing Hal Gill during the regular season, but I do want to just see how he fits there and how he fits in our lineup. It's not the worst. It's not great either, I don't think. Like, what's his best fit? Actually, he's the best fit on the 2nd pairing. I guess it's just because he's playing with Blue Jays, but yeah, Hal Gill's a decent option if we want to put him in the lineup in the playoffs at all. And he also is a pretty big guy, so he could probably be a little bit physical in the playoffs, which some of these young guys can't. Okay, so those are the trades we're going to make, but we are still going to go into the trade deadline and just see if there's anything else out there, but I don't think there's going to be. And if there isn't, then we'll probably just sim the rest of the regular season and see if we make that playoff spot, which we probably will. At least I hope so, as Bork has returned at the right time, which is good because he will be playing right after this deadline ends. He's been a pretty solid player for us on that third line. We will go in as a buyer, but I don't know if we're going to be actually making trades for anything else. We will also take a look at all the AI trades as well, because I'm kind of curious on what happens. So here's what's out there on the block. I don't think we really need to trade for anything. Like Frolov would be interesting because he's only 26, but he probably has a decent chunk of value. Like if I went to try and trade for Frolov, I feel like we would have to give up like a top prospect or like a decently good pick. So let's see, Frolov, yeah, he has a good value. Like if we went find trade, we'd have to give up one of our top 6 forward prospects, a third and a sixth. That's not a bad thing to do really, but at the same time, Frolov would be more of a rental, and I don't know if he even fits our system. No, he doesn't. He's a good young option, but he's probably going to go somewhere else via trade. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be making any trades. I think it's kind of pointless because we did just make some decent offers already. Yeah, we're not going to be making any trades. Let's quit this trade deadline and see all the trades that happened around the league. And hopefully there was some players going to teams they actually played for, because that's always fun to see. And then we will sim the remainder of the regular season. I didn't want to go to edit player, goddammit. Let's see what trades happened around the league. So let's go to the bottom of this list. So the first trade that happened was Brunette and Jean-Luc Grandpierre go to Dallas for a 3rd-round pick and a 4th-round pick. Then there was our Hal Gill trade. Actually, that Brunette one happened before the deadline. Interesting. Then after our 2 deals, the Nashville Predators acquire a 1st, a 2nd, and Rafalski, not Brian Rafalski, but for Mike Fisher and Matthew Biron. Interesting. The New York Islanders get a 1st, a 2nd, and 2 others for Winehandle and Strudwick, who go to Montreal. The Rangers get a 2nd and a 3rd for Mark Parrish, who goes to Ottawa, as well with Scott Parker and a 3rd. Washington gets a 1st and a 2nd for Alan McCauley, Artem Chubarov, and a 5th-round pick. Dallas gets Chris Garatin and Joe Corvo for a 1st and a 2nd and some goaltending prospect. LA gets a 1st, a 3rd, and Volpatti for Halavich and Brian Rafalski, who heads back to New Jersey. Interesting. Columbus gets a 3rd, and Rick Barry from Boston for Thomas Franz and whoever that is, and a 4th-round pick. LA gets a 1st-round pick for Alex Frolov, a 4th, and a 4th. So that's kind of interesting. So Frolov going to Minnesota, who I think won the Cup last year, if I'm not mistaken. Columbus gets Mike Greer, a 4th and a 4th for Ulf Olduya and Braylon Lowry, so 2 prospects, I think. Chicago gets a 2nd and a 3rd for a 3rd, Willie Mitchell and Stefan Robida. And then Montreal gets Shane Doan, a 4th and a 5th for his 2nd, Svitov, and a 3rd. That's interesting, seeing Shane Doan go to Montreal. And then Chicago acquires a 3rd and 3rd for Jason Krog and Timo Solani, who go back to the Ducks. That's weird. I don't even understand how Timo Solani's literally gone from the Ducks and now he's back in Anaheim again. And Jason Krog also goes back to Anaheim again. It's weird. So those are the only trades that happened. Not a lot of trades actually at this trade deadline. Expected a little bit more, but that is kind of interesting. Let's make sure our lines are still the way we had them, which I think they should be. Yep, they are. That's good to go. Let's sim the rest of this regular season and see if we could make the playoffs, which we probably should since we are 1st in our division at this point. Let's see if we could win these games down the stretch. But yeah, hopefully we have a decent playoffs as well. Hopefully we're not like one of those teams that simulate really good in the regular season, but then like choke in the playoffs. So we have 2 ties right after the trade deadline, so that's good. We get some points at least, because if they were OT losses, I think we wouldn't get any points, if I'm not mistaken. There's a shutout win, but then we lose in overtime to the Islanders. There's a loss, a win, a loss. So a little bit of a rough month, it seems like. as Manitoba has some players back, which I don't remember who was injured. It was Wong, and I think that might have been it. I think it was Wong only, if I'm not mistaken. Which I don't remember who was in the lineup, but I think Wong actually was on this line, and then Ivanov was actually like somewhere else. I don't remember where Ivanov was in the lineup. Let's take Abney out. I don't even remember who I had out of the lineup. So Ivanov goes in, and that is good to go. Breland's been injured in the AHL. Let's go replace player. Damn, the AHL has been like slammed with injuries this season. Ever since, what is his name, the defenseman went down, Edmonds, in the earlier season. And Brody's been injured, which is good that we brought in Hal Gill when we did. That's actually who I was kind of hoping would go down with an injury, just so we could kind of see a little bit of Hal Gill. So that's kind of interesting that Brody goes down, because he was a -8 so far this season. And Brody's already back. Hopefully Hal Gill had some pretty solid numbers with us so far. 2 games and he was an even 0, so that's good that he was playing good defensively for us. We'll put Brody back in. There's back-to-back losses. That's not good. Have we clinched the playoff spot yet? I don't think so. Yeah, we did. Wow, we already clinched the playoff spot. That's kind of surprising. This division is a little bit weak by comparison to the other divisions, but we've already clinched a playoff spot, so we are going to the playoffs for the 3rd consecutive year, I think. There's a win over Toronto to stop a losing streak. Last 3 games of the regular season is a loss, a win, and a loss. So we kind of fell off a little bit near the end, because we did lose 3, 4, 5 of our last 7 games. Hopefully that means we will have a good playoff sim, and we don't finish first in our division because the Devils managed to pass us. But we do finish with 97 points. Not too bad. And the regular season is done for everybody else. So let's take a look at our player stats and the standings. And then, we'll take a look at who we're facing in the first round of the playoffs. So let's go by centers still on our team first. So 87 points for Patrice Bergeron. His best season so far by quite a bit. 20 points more than last year, pretty much. So that's pretty nice. Evgeny Malkin also had 83 points. Pretty good. He went up by almost 30 points from last season. And then Houghton, who we brought in from Los Angeles, 61 points. This guy's going to get probably a decent amount of statistical growth, but I am very happy with this guy. Also, not to mention his jersey number is actually kind of funny. I didn't realize he was that number, but whatever. Kuznetsov, 47 points, so not too bad from him as well. Stefan Yell had 26 points, and he had none with us because we didn't play him yet, but we might play him at some point in the playoffs if we really need him to. And then Frolov, 20 points in 82 games, only a -5, so not too bad from him. Clinch had 8 points in 44 games and was a -1, so he was a better player in the lineup than Marcel Hossa was. And also Clinch does not take a lot of penalties. Only 2 penalty minutes in 44 games. Left wing wise, Kovalchuk had 75 points this year, a little bit less than last year, but he still put up a decent amount of points. And then Likachev, 57 points. That's a pretty good year for Likachev. Definitely better than last year, where he only had 34 points combined between 2 teams. And then Marcel Hossa only played 46 games with 13 points. Not left wing wise, I was going to say left wing wise, but right wing wise, Valerie Bure, 62 points. He's probably close to retirement, but he did have a better season than he did last year with us, so that's pretty good. Richard Park, 54 points, not too bad of a signing for sure, and he had 26 goals, which is nice. And then Brock Bork, 50 points, pretty solid as well of a signing, 50 points in 74 games. He was injured for a good chunk because I don't remember what his injury was, but a very good season from him. And then Bobrovsky on the 4th line and power play had 35 points. So a lot of the young guys we brought in via free agency like Bork, Bobrovsky, and Houghton all played pretty good this season. And then defensively, Thomas Malik had 26 points, and he was on the top 6 pairing, which is kind of crazy that he put up that much points on that pairing. But he was a plus 24 this year, which is awesome. Then Emmanuel Martinez, 22 points and a plus 23, so a pretty good second season for Martinez. He is still taking a lot of penalty minutes, but he is playing good defensive hockey, and he's also putting up some okay offensive numbers. And then Brody, 18 points in 80 games, and he was a minus 12, so he's a little bit of a risk in terms of defensive play, it looks like. So we could always take him out of the lineup if he is minus in the playoffs and put in somebody like Hal Gill. Wall had 16 points in 80 games. He was a plus 24, so a pretty good rookie season for Jalen Wall. And then Blue Jays, 16 points as well, minus 1, not too bad. Conley in his first season at 18 years of age, 15 points, which is pretty solid, and a plus 30. Very impressed with Reed Conley's rookie season. That is a very good defensive first season from him. He's actually not really a great fit on any of our defensive pairings, so we might need to find a new coach at some point. And then Hal Gill only played how many games with us? Two games, and he was an even 0 and only had 1 shot on goal. Goaltending-wise, Carey Price went 30, 18, and 4 with 4 shutouts and 903 save percentage and a 2.93 goals against average, so he was pretty solid. And then Brian Elliott was really solid as well as a backup with a 13, 10, and 1 record, 2 shutouts, and 916 save percentage and a 2.53 goals against average. Not too bad. Let's take a look at the entire league to see who led in all that stuff. So forward-wise, the best forward for points was Joe Thornton with 99 points. LeCavalier right behind him with 94, and then the youngsters, Sidney Crosby with 91, and Daniel Sedin also up at 91. Kopitar as well, a young guy at 90 points. Prospel at 90 points. Looks like Tampa Bay is a very dangerous offensive team again because Prospel, St. Louis, and LeCavalier all 89 plus points. And then Pavel Markov up there for the Penguins, and Patrick Marleau up there as well. Best goal scorer this year was Dave Scatchard. What the heck? Alex Ovechkin is also up there, and Daniel Alfredson. So it looks like Ovi's going to win his first Maurice Richard trophy, and he's going to tie with Daniel Alfredson, who's on the Ducks, which is just really weird. And Dave Scatchard, how the heck did Dave Scatchard put up 41 goals this year? He only had 19 all of last year. I don't get it. He must have like a new really good line mate or something. But that's kind of interesting. Best 4 plus minus for forwards was Marian Hossa at a plus 39, him and Bure and Sundstrom. Most penalty minutes by a forward was Matthew Barnaby with 285. So that is the forward stats. Best defenseman for points is going to be Wade Redden, who's more than likely going to win the Norris. So that's kind of interesting. Kronwall was behind him as well. Same with Gonchar, Pronger, Morris, and Vishnowsky all had 50 plus points. Best goals for a defenseman was Redden and then Morris and Pronger. Best plus minus by a defenseman was Branislav Meze at a plus 46. Jeez. Didn't we have him for a bit? Yeah, we did have him for a bit. I guess San Jose is also a really good offensive team. And most penalty minutes by a defenseman was Craig Rivet, somehow putting up 325 penalty minutes. I don't even know how these guys are taking this many penalty minutes because I didn't make them that much in terms of physical, but my god, that's a lot of PIMs. Goalie-wise, the best goalie for wins was Marc-Andre Fleury in San Jose. Oh yeah, I forgot that Fleury was drafted by the San Jose Sharks. But he had a really good year this year. He might end up winning a Vezina, as Rick DiPietro right behind him. You know, DiPietro actually might win the Vezina this year. Who knows? Craig Anderson as well is up there. Most shutouts was DiPietro with 10 shutouts in Ottawa, which is kind of weird. Best save percentage by a starter was going to be Craig Anderson with a 918. But the best goals against average by a starter is Marc-Andre Fleury and Roberto Luongo with a 2.32. Interesting. Most points by a goalie, out of curiosity, was Backstrom with 5 assists. Any goalie goals? No goalie goals. And then best rookie this year for points was Kimmo Sahonen with 60 points. He was the 2nd overall pick in last year's draft. And then Jeremy Suter and Valery Shishkinov. Interesting. Let's take a look at those standings now and see how we played in terms of everything around the league. So, we were the 8th best team in the NHL behind Minnesota, San Jose, Tampa Bay, Ottawa, Dallas, New Jersey, and Europe. We did fall off a little bit near the end, so that's probably why we slid in the standings. As I think originally we were like 4th place in the NHL at one point. Goals for per game, we were top 10, which is pretty good. 3.34 goals per game, 274. The best offensive team, though, was the San Jose Sharks and in Tampa Bay, and in Europe somehow, and in Minnesota and Ottawa. And in goals against per game, looks like we improved a little bit defensively, actually. Yeah, we did improve defensively. 2.89 goals against per game. We were probably around like halfway point. I would say like 13th or 14th in the league, which is not that bad. Power play percentage, though, our power play is still one of the worst in the NHL, so hopefully that turns it around in the playoffs, 14.3%. And in our penalty kill, 83.1%, also improved, I think, since I last looked, if I'm mistaken. It's still around mid-table, so we could improve our special teams going into the postseason a little bit, but our team still played decent, and yeah, we dropped off a little bit near the end of the season, but hopefully we could have a pretty good playoff run. Okay, so that is that. Let's take a look at who we are facing in the first round of the playoffs. Hopefully it's a team we could actually beat. And it's going to be the New York Rangers. So we played the Rangers just last season, I'm pretty sure, and they had like Pavel Bure and stuff like that. Looks like they didn't have as good of a season this year as they did last year. They finished 34, 34, 11, and 3. Let's do a comparison based on the standings first, and then we will take a look at their lineup. So yeah, they were the third team in our division that made the playoffs, just beating out the Islanders and the Caps. We scored way more goals than they did by almost 30 goals, or 20 goals, no, 30 goals. I almost did my math wrong. Goals against wise, we also allowed 21 less goals than they did. And in power play wise, they were better than us on the power play, which kind of makes sense. And in penalty kill wise, they were a little bit better. So they were better on their special teams, and then we were better 5-on-5. So it should be kind of interesting to see if we could beat them. Let's take a look at their lineup and see if it is a team we could beat. I don't know how similar it is to their team that they played last year in the playoffs, but we will take a look. So here is their top line. They have Alex Castles, who had 83 points. He's on their top line now, alongside Matt Sundin. That's a little weird. So Matt Sundin was in St. Louis last year, but he was point per game this year with the Rangers. Interesting. They also have Alex Kovalev, so a pretty, well, two veterans on the top line, and then a good young player on that top line as well. Pretty good top line in general. Second line, Gagne, Omar Cousins, and Matthew Barnaby. So Barnaby and Gagne look pretty good on that their wingers. But this team looks horrible in terms of centers and on the bottom six. My God, I don't even know how they made the playoffs. But Omar Cousins is a 74, and he's playing second line minutes. Now, this guy did put up 41 points now in 81 games, but it could be because of his wingers. And in the third line, they have Brennan Othman, who's a 76, DeAndre Bohinski, who's a 74, and Vyacheslav Ovechkin, who's a 78. I don't even know why this team is playing like this. Like, they should be able to pick up some decent free agents, but they're playing young guys instead. So it's kind of an interesting team, I would say. And in fourth line wise, they have Andreas Dackel, who's dropped off a cliff. They also have Darren Raymond, who they drafted a couple years ago. Actually, one season ago, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And they also have Timofey Punos. So a very interesting team. I mean, they do have that offensive threat of a top line, I guess you could say, even though Sundin is dropping. They also do have Barnaby and Gagne, but everybody else on this team is probably as good as some of our AHL lines, which is a little weird. And then defensively, they don't have a great defensive core either. They do have Barrett Jackman, who in real life was a very good defensive defenseman, but other than that, they are playing a lot of young defensemen in their lineup, including Kari Pettinen, who they drafted 8th overall at one point. They also do have Riley Price, who they drafted at 18th in one point. Robinson Anthony, and in their top 6 is really weak in Marcel Otters, and Kurt Sauer's actually in their lineup, which is interesting. So a very weird looking team here in New York. And then goalie wise, they have Alex Auld and Jose Theodore. So if anything, Jose Theodore will steal them games in the playoffs, because he did have actually a pretty solid regular season, I would say, for being on a team that looks like this. So they did lose Pavel Bure in the offseason. But yeah, they have a really weird roster. And in depth-wise, they don't even really have that much depth either. They have Vitaly Pinchuk. They have Tristan Waugh. it's either Wall or Roy. And then they also have Richard Matvichuk, who's dropped off a lot too. So overall wise, I think we could actually beat these guys, but it's going to be kind of an interesting series nonetheless, just because you can't really count out their top line, I would say, and some of their top 6. But then you get to their bottom 6 and their defensive core. We should be able to beat them, but you never know. The simulation could just get us swept, because that's what simulations do sometimes. And yeah, I think that is going to do it, guys, for this episode of our Atlanta Thrashers franchise mode. So in next episode, we will take it to the first round near New York Rangers as we look to win our first playoff series. So let me know what you guys think down below, and I'll see you guys next time.